Hey there. Welcome to your personalized deep dive. I know you're looking to really step up your teamwork game. And you sent over some really fascinating material on emotional intelligence and collaboration, specifically the Pathway to Work podcast and their episode on thriving in teams. Every time I hear that phrase, teamwork makes the dream work, I think, well, that's easier said than done, right? But that's why I'm so glad to have our EQ expert here to help us unpack these insights and really figure out how you can put them into practice.
Excited to be here. And yeah, everyone wants that dream team. But figuring out how EQ fits in is definitely key.
Totally. So, expert speaker, let's get right into it. For anyone who's new to this whole EQ thing, how would you explain emotional intelligence, or EQ, in simple terms?
Yeah. Well, it's basically the ability to understand your own emotions and manage them well. But the really important part is it also means you can understand how other people are feeling and even influence their emotions in a positive way.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm already seeing how this could be huge for teams. Like, imagine if you misread a teammate's frustration as disinterest, right? I mean, that could lead to some serious communication issues.
Oh, absolutely. If you think about a time when you felt totally misunderstood, you probably didn't feel like contributing your best, right? EQ can help prevent those kinds of disconnects, and it creates the space where everyone feels heard and understood.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the Pathway to Work podcast breaks EQ down into these 5 components based on Daniel Goldman's model. And I'm curious, which of these components do you think is like the most crucial for someone who really wants to thrive, not just survive, but thrive in a team setting?
That's a great question. All 5 are super important and connected, but I think motivation is essential for thriving. You can be self-aware, you can even regulate your emotions, but without that drive to achieve something together, it's tough to keep the team going strong, especially when challenges pop up.
Yeah, okay, I'm totally with you on that. I think for me, though, motivation is usually tied to how well I'm connecting with my teammates and feeling valued for my contributions. So maybe empathy and social skills are right up there, too.
Yeah, you're hitting on something really important. It all works together. Empathy helps you understand where your teammates are coming from, which can boost that motivation to support each other. And then strong social skills, well, they help you communicate and build those relationships that make collaboration fun, not just a chore.
So it's not about, like, mastering each part on its own. It's about seeing how they all work together.
Exactly. It's like, imagine gears in a well-oiled machine. Each gear has a unique role, but it's that smooth interaction between them that makes the machine powerful.
Okay, I like that. That's helpful. Now, Pathway to Work told this story about a team that managed to meet this crazy deadline. They were just so in tune with each other's stress. It was amazing. And they actually had fun along the way. I think that really shows how high EQ can have tangible benefits for a team.
Absolutely. That story is a perfect example of how self-awareness and empathy can help a team be more resilient and adaptable. They knew each other's triggers, supported each other's needs, and they navigated that pressure more effectively, which helped them achieve their goal.
All right, so we're seeing that high EQ teams just function better. But let's get specific. Pathway to Work really emphasizes active listening as a super important skill for collaboration. They even ask listeners to think back to their last meeting and ask, was I really listening, or was I just waiting to speak? Have you ever fallen into that trap?
Oh, for sure. It's easy to get caught up in our own thoughts, especially in meetings when we're excited to contribute. But when you're really actively listening, you have to put your own agenda aside and focus on what the other person is trying to say.
Yeah, I get that. They had this tip that I've been trying out. After someone finishes speaking, I try to sum up their main points. And you know what? It's amazing, and make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
But it also shows them that I'm actually listening.
That is such a simple but powerful technique. It shows how active listening is more than just words. You're using eye contact, nodding, all that, to show that you're engaged, and then asking questions, reflecting back what you heard. It ensures that you understand.
Okay, I'm going to be more present in my next team meeting. Now, what are some other skills, besides active listening, that can help us improve teamwork?
Well, a big one is understanding that everyone has a different work style. Some people love detailed plans, others are big picture thinkers. Knowing these differences can help you communicate better and collaborate more effectively.
Oh, I can already think of a few colleagues who fit those descriptions. Just acknowledging those differences can change things, right?
Absolutely. It's about embracing those differences. Imagine pairing a detail-oriented person with a big picture thinker. That combo can lead to some really innovative solutions.
That's a great point. So we have active listening, adapting to different work styles. What about feedback? That always feels tricky in teams.
It can be, but it's also a great opportunity for growth. Pathway to Work suggests responding to feedback calmly and openly, even when it's hard to hear. If something isn't clear, ask questions instead of getting defensive.
Oh, I've been there. I once got some pretty harsh feedback. It really stung at first. But then I tried to see it from their perspective, and I realized they were just trying to help me improve.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of how self-regulation and empathy can turn a negative experience into a learning opportunity. By asking questions, you're showing that you're open to feedback.
That's true. Now, on a more positive note, Pathway to Work also talked about celebrating wins and acknowledging contributions. Why is that so important for teams?
Well, celebrating team wins is a great way to boost morale. It's like saying, we did this together and it feels awesome. But acknowledging individual contributions is important too. It shows people that their skills and efforts are valued, which makes them feel like they belong. And it encourages them to keep doing their best.
I completely agree. I remember working really hard on this one project, but nobody even noticed. It was so demotivating. It made me feel like my work didn't matter. So yeah, acknowledging individual efforts, even small ones, it's really important.
It is. It really is. When people feel appreciated, they're more engaged, productive, and committed to the team.
That makes sense. Okay, let's be real. Even on the best teams, conflict is bound to happen. How can we approach disagreements in a way that's productive and doesn't derail the team's progress?
That's where managing conflict with empathy comes in. It's about staying calm, listening to understand the other person's perspective, and finding solutions that work for everyone. Conflict isn't always a bad thing, it can be an opportunity to grow.
Pathway to Work had this case study about a woman named Sophia. She joined a team that was basically falling apart because of personality clashes and poor communication, and she turned things around. By having these weekly team check-ins, where everyone could share their progress, challenges, and solutions, it shows how important it is to create opportunities for open and honest communication, especially when there's conflict.
Yeah, that's a great example of how being proactive with communication and really trying to understand each other's points of view can help a team go from dysfunctional to successful.
So, thinking about your own experiences, how do you think using empathy in conflict resolution could help with a challenging team situation you're facing? It's something we should all think about.
It is. Because a lot of times, conflict comes from misunderstandings and unmet needs. So by using empathy, we can start to close those gaps and find solutions that work for everyone.
Okay, so we've talked about active listening, adapting to different work styles, feedback, celebrating wins, and managing conflict with empathy. It's obvious that building a great team takes more than just technical skills.
Definitely. Emotional intelligence is like the secret ingredient that takes a team from good to amazing. It helps us navigate those tricky human interactions and achieve extraordinary results together.
Okay, I'm inspired to improve my EQ.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something Pathway to Work mentioned. This idea of developing a collaborative mindset, that shift from ye to we thinking. I think this is where things get interesting. How do we actually make that shift, especially when work can feel so competitive?
That's a fantastic question, and one that we'll definitely dive deeper into in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned. We'll explore how to foster that we're in this together spirit, where individual success is linked to the team's success. Welcome back. We're diving deeper into building that collaborative mindset, that shift from me to we thinking.
Yes. I'm excited to dig into this. It sounds good in theory, but work can be so competitive, So how do we actually create that we're all in this together feeling?
That's the question, isn't it? It's not about getting rid of individual ambition. It's about realizing that when the whole team succeeds, everyone benefits. Think of it like those awesome assists in basketball. The player who passes the ball is just as important as the one who makes the shot.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's about aligning personal goals with the team's goals.
Right. When everyone's working towards the same thing, the team moves forward so much faster than anyone could on their own.
The Pathway to Work also talked about psychological safety. They made it sound really important for collaboration. What exactly is psychological safety?
Think of it as a space where people feel comfortable speaking up, sharing ideas, even making mistakes, without worrying about being judged or punished. It's about trust and respect, where everyone feels safe to be themselves.
That makes sense. It sounds like that kind of environment would really encourage people to share their best ideas.
Absolutely. When people feel safe, they share their unique perspectives, which leads to better solutions and more innovation.
So how can leaders create this psychological safety? It sounds simple, but I imagine it takes effort to actually do it.
It definitely takes a conscious effort. Leaders have to model open communication
Hmm.
and make space for different perspectives. They also have to be willing to admit their own mistakes and be open to feedback even when it's tough.
So you're saying leaders need to be vulnerable, show that it's okay to not have all the answers.
Exactly. When leaders are transparent and human, it creates a more approachable environment where others feel safe to do the same.
Yeah, that makes sense. It creates a culture where everyone learns and grows together. Speaking of growth, something that resonated with me from Pathway to Work was the emphasis on celebrating both team wins and individual contributions. I think that's something I could work on.
It's a great insight. Celebrating team wins is important, but acknowledging individual efforts is so powerful. It's like saying, hey, I see you, I appreciate your hard work, I'm glad you're on the team.
Yeah, they gave some really simple examples, like setting a thank you note or mentioning someone's contribution during a meeting. Small gestures, but they can make people feel good.
Absolutely. Those small acts of recognition make a big difference. They make people feel like they belong and motivate them to keep doing their best.
It's interesting how these small things can have such a big impact on team performance.
It's true. The quality of relationships within a team can make or break a project, even a whole organization. Strong relationships based on trust, respect, and support are the foundation of high-performing teams.
Okay, so we've talked about the good side of collaboration, but let's be real. Teamwork isn't always sunshine and rainbows. There will be disagreements. How do we handle conflict so that it's constructive, not destructive?
You're right, conflict is inevitable. The key is to manage it effectively, and that's where empathy comes in.
Pathway to Work had a whole section on managing conflict with empathy. I have to admit, that's something I struggle with. I usually try to avoid conflict altogether.
I think many people do. But conflict can actually be a good thing if we approach it with the right mindset. Disagreement doesn't have to be negative. It can mean that people care about the work and want to find the best solution.
So it's about changing how we think about conflict, seeing it as a chance for positive change.
Exactly. When we use empathy, we try to understand the other person's perspective, and that helps us turn a potentially bad situation into a good one.
Pathway to Work had some good advice.
Oh, yeah.
Stay calm, focus on solutions instead of blame. Try to see the conflict as a shared problem to solve. It sounds simple, but I bet it's hard to actually do.
It does take practice, but the more we practice using empathy and collaboration, the better we become at handling those tough conversations.
That case study about Sophia and her team really showed how powerful empathy can be. It's amazing how she turned a dysfunctional team around just by creating space for open communication and understanding.
It really is. It reminds us that even the worst conflicts can be resolved when we listen with empathy and work together to find solutions.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Different work styles, psychological safety, giving and receiving feedback, celebrating wins, managing conflict with empathy. It's clear that building a great team takes more than just skills and knowledge.
Absolutely. Emotional intelligence is what unlocks a team's true potential. It's about connecting as humans, understanding and respecting each other, and working together towards a shared goal.
All right, so we know EQ is super important for teamwork, but I'm curious, how does all of this apply to a world that's so reliant on technology and remote work? I feel like those virtual interactions can sometimes lack that personal touch.
That's a great question, and it's something we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. The basics of emotional intelligence stay the same, but there are definitely unique challenges when it comes to building relationships online.
Okay, so we're back and ready to tackle the big question. How do we make all this EQ stuff work? When we're not actually in the same room, can you really build a strong team when everyone's miles apart just staring at screens?
It's definitely harder, that's for sure. But it's not impossible. Everything we've talked about, empathy, self-awareness, good communication, it all still matters. We just have to figure out how to make it work online.
Right, that makes sense. But how do we actually do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, one of the biggest challenges with remote work is that you miss out on those little interactions. You know, those chats by the coffee machine, catching up before a meeting. They might seem small, but they really help build connections.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've definitely noticed that missing piece. I just jump right into business on video calls. It feels kind of impersonal sometimes.
Exactly. It's easy to forget that we're talking to real people, not just faces on a screen. So one thing you can do is intentionally create those virtual water cooler moments. Start meetings with a quick personal check-in, ask about their weekend, their hobbies, anything like that.
I like that. We have to be more deliberate about connecting. When we're not physically together.
Right. And it's not just about talking. Body language is still important, even on video calls. Pay attention to your tone of voice, facial expressions, all that. Make eye contact, smile, nod to show you're listening.
Speaking of listening, the pathway to work. Really stressed active listening for remote teams. Why is it even more important online?
Because there are so many distractions at home, emails, notifications, that pile of laundry you've been meaning to fold. Active listening online takes way more focus.
They even suggested using video calls whenever possible, instead of just email or chat. What's the reasoning there?
Well, think about a time you misunderstood a text. Without seeing the person's face or hearing their tone, it's easy to misinterpret things. Video calls help us avoid those misunderstandings.
Makes sense. It makes me wonder if we need a whole new set of skills like virtual EQ or something.
That's an interesting idea. It's not really about new skills. It's more about adapting the ones we have. For example, the pathway to work talked about how to be collaborative in virtual teams. One thing they emphasized was being mindful of how we share credit and acknowledge contributions.
Why is that especially important online?
It's easier for people's work to go unnoticed remotely. A quick thank you in an email or a shout out during a meeting can make someone feel really appreciated.
Yeah, it's those little things that matter. Okay, now let's talk about conflict. It's bound to happen on any team, but it feels like it could escalate faster online. It's harder to read people's cues.
You're right, and that's where empathy and self-control are so important before you send that angry email or write a defensive message. Take a deep breath and try to see things from their side.
Yeah, we need to be extra careful online.
We do. The pathway to work also talked about setting clear expectations and boundaries for remote teams to avoid misunderstandings.
What kind of boundaries?
Things like how to communicate, who to contact for what methods to use, what the expected response times are, and being upfront about your availability. Setting boundaries around work hours to avoid burnout.
Yeah, without clear boundaries, it's easy to feel like you're always working.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance where everyone feels connected, but also respected and able to disconnect.
This has been such a helpful conversation. I have a whole new understanding of teamwork, especially in this virtual world we live in.
It has been a great conversation. The important thing is, building a great team, whether online or in person, takes constant learning, adapting, and genuine care for each other.
Well said. And speaking of care, what are some ways you've seen teams successfully create those water cooler moments online?
Oh, there are tons of creative ways. Some teams have virtual coffee breaks or happy hours just to chat and catch up. Others use online platforms to share photos or funny stories. I even heard of a team that started a virtual book club.
Those are great ideas.
It's about finding ways to connect as people.
Even when you're not physically in the same place.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Just a quick check-in at the beginning of a meeting, asking about someone's weekend, sharing a funny story. Those little things can make a big difference.
So be mindful and make an effort to connect.
Yes. And leaders can set the example by encouraging those informal interactions.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on teamwork.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, building a great team is a journey. Embrace the challenges, celebrate the wins, and keep learning together.
And to you, listener, we hope this deep dive has given you the tools to create a team where everyone feels valued and supported.
Remember, even small changes can make a big difference. So pick one thing you want to improve and commit to doing it.
Whether it's listening more carefully, showing appreciation to a teammate, or just taking a moment to connect. Every effort counts.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep building those amazing teams.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.